when we're talking about spiritual friends, Kalyanamita. Laura Burges is a Dharma friend. I know her from San Francisco Zen Center. I think it's often, and not, I mean, we're all tribal, that we all sort of like circle around our own little sangha. And we forget that we're part of this Maha Sangha. And that everything that is happening here is happening there. I mean, there's no human suffering, whatever flavor you want to call it. We tend so much to isolate into our own suffering as my suffering. And of course, we all have our own particular flavor and way, but I also think there's something very beautiful, because in the way Seeking Mind talks, we do hear something universal and particular as that helps me. So Laura Burges, The Zen Way of Recovery and Illuminated Path Out of the Darkness of Addiction. When I first started practicing, nobody talked about alcoholism. AA was like a different world over there, and Laura was one of the people who has forged this path. Again, it's probably not the one she wanted to do, you know. I mean, I'm going to read you some of this, but there's suffering here. But her first chapter is called Way Seeking Mind. I thought, well, that's cool. So it's a long chapter. I'm going to pick and choose, probably even more than I already pick and choose. But here we go. It starts with a quote by Dogen Zenji. To believe means to have faith that one is already inherently in the way, and that one is not lost, deluded or upside down, and no increase and no decrease and no mistake. To believe means to have faith that one is already inherently in the way, and that one is not lost, deluded or upside down, and no increase and no decrease and no mistake. I have practiced for many years at San Francisco Zen Center, part of the Soto Zen lineage from Japan, and these are the words of our great Soto Zen ancestor, Dogen Zenji. I first read them on the refrigerator of my lifelong friend, Deborah, who is Deborah Madison, who we also know through cooking. So, you know, there's circles within circles here. We all know each other on some level. Deborah had read Zen Mind Beginner's Mind, and she was sitting zazen with a local group of practitioners. In Deborah's kitchen, talking late into the night, we shared our first impressions of Buddhism and the various insults and joys that life had dealt us since we'd seen each other last. It was a time in my life when I was totally lost, deluded, and upside down. I wondered how I could ever believe otherwise. Dependence on alcohol and the wreckage of it had caused had left me without hope. Shortly after that late night conversation with my friend, learning about Sangha and Zen practice, I found myself standing at the doors of San Francisco Zen Center. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, we're looking at Linda, who's nodding. Not many people wake up one morning and say, it's a beautiful day. I think I'll go sit cross-legged facing a wall for the rest of my life. Most of us have come to face to face with the first noble truth by the time we step onto the path of practice, the truth that in life there is great suffering. Catching a glimpse of Buddhism, I thought that perhaps the teachings of Zen would help release me from my own self-destructive way of living, from the suffering I had caused myself and others. This was the opening of Way Seeking Mind and stepping onto the path of awakening. I think because I was sitting around as a teenager, I encountered drugs and alcohol, and they quickly became a shortcut to what I thought was a spiritual experience. I think that's not uncommon. Marion Woodman talks about that. It's just a confusion here. When I drank, I felt the painful boundaries between me and the other people melt away. To me, this was freedom, the freedom to do and be whatever I wanted without thought of the consequences. Once I started drinking, I craved more. I would wake up in the morning not remembering what I had done the night before. Then she talks about her one of her boyfriends who just happened to wander down, as many people do, into Tassajara Zen Mountain Center. And actually, he kind of broke the rules by coming down, and a monk was really nice to him. And fed him and let him use the hot springs and gave him a loaf of freshly baked bread to take on his ride home. He paid for the gas he'd stolen. Oh, he came in, he stole the gas and he got caught, I get that. And then headed back up the road. This encounter had a profound effect on Chris. He was touched to be treated in this way when he was behaving badly. When we read this story, we made a pilgrimage to Tassajara one hot summer day, when we heard this story, and spent the day skinny dipping and drinking wine at the Narrows and swimming the swimming hole downstream from the monastery. I didn't realize that within 3 years, I'd be living there as a Zen student myself. There's so many stories of people, and often drugged people in the 60s and 70s wandering down the path. They're all high, and they all end up these really strict Zen students. She began to descend more and more into drinking. It was clear I needed to find another way to live. I moved into San Francisco Zen Center. We're skipping over some things here. And plunged headfirst into practice. I knew more of it. I got to be friends with his son Dorsey. He had become a Zen priest after a career performing as a female impersonator. Got a great book out if you want to read. It was great. And then working as a community activist. Edward S.B. Brown was Tonto, head of practice at the Zen Center at the time, and he was clearly practicing with strong emotions and still does. I thought if they could practice, perhaps I too could take up this ancient way of life and be healed. Without alcohol to numb me, a lot of pain, waves of loss, rage, shame, regret, and disappointment came up for me when I began meditating in the Zendo with others. For a while, every time I sat on the zafu, I cried silent tears. A friend of mine who was not an alcoholic put it so well: alcohol is like a credit card for pain. You pay it back later with interest. My tears were like a quiet rain after a long, dry season. And before too long, I was at Tassajara for the winter practice period. I loved the rigor of Tassajara. I love the order and ritual of practice, the intensity of cold in the winter, and the intentional activity of chopping wood and carrying water. I love the temple bells and the sound of the wooden hammer hitting the wooden hon that echoed through the remote mountain valley, calling us to the meditation hall. I loved getting out of bed in my little cabin in the chill, dark morning to put on my robes and walk to the Zendo. I love the clarity that came with this radical shift in my life. There was a sense of timelessness in the mountain monastery, a chance to step out of American culture and find myself anew. I found a kind of freedom in not having to do whatever I wanted. The freedom of restraint, being free to sit still, being free not to do the first thing that came to my mind. Freedom from drugs and alcohol, being able to align myself in an ancient and timeless way of life. I no longer felt like a dry leaf in a strong cup. Met her husband in Tasahara. They were married. They returned to practice at Zen Center. She had a daughter. And then after 5 years of practicing, someone offered her a drink and she took it. Not linear, folks. I knew of gifted Buddhist teachers who had not been able to control their addictions, and that the impact on their lives and on their communities had been devastating. Some had died of addiction. I realized that for me, Buddhism could not cure this disease. She heard a voice inside that said, please, please help me. Though I don't know who or what was calling, I got up in the middle of this class where she heard this voice, made a phone call that would profoundly change the trajectory of my life. I found a program of recovery and began to heal from the ancient twisted karma of alcoholism. I don't believe that moments of awakening are as rare as we may think. Sitting in that classroom, hearing that voice at San Francisco State, I had a moment of Zen awakening. My life was utterly different before and after that moment. Found a group of people to practice with, AA. Despite years of practice, I needed to find and work a program of recovery to maintain sobriety so that I could renew my Buddhist practice with greater clarity and integrity. Today, I try to live each day within the principles of recovery. I meditate regularly, and I meet with others so we can share this way of life with one another. I haven't had a drink since September 28th, 1985. And there is no doubt in my mind that I could never have done this on my own without the support of numberless others who also treasure recovery. You know who you are. The Buddhist teacher Robert Thurman once said, practice isn't just about sitting on a cushion. It is about finding a kind of radical Dharma freedom. When faced with a choice, rather than responding instinctively, we pause and turn in the appropriate direction. The great gift of practice has been able to work with other people in recovery and discover ways in which Buddhism can support a clean and sober life. Sobriety allows us to turn again and again in the appropriate direction. In his book, Being Peace, Thich Nhat Hanh says, if we are peaceful, if we are happy, we can smile, and everyone in our family, our entire society will benefit from our practice. This is an important reminder. We don't just claim peace and happiness as our birthright. Rather, we rest in happiness and peace for the benefit of all people. May we meet one another fully, face to face and heart to heart, as we walk this path of practice and recovery, finding our way together. Like Linda said, I hope my talk isn't too depressing. We all say that. It's like, I'll tell you the good stuff, but the other stuff, yeah, well, it might be a bit of a bug. But in the end, it glows. Doesn't it all glow? I mean, that's the mystery of it. But it's also, it doesn't glow because the first time you turn toward it, it glows. The first time usually you turn towards these things, and then over, I mean, nobody knows what death is and how deep it person we love who's dying, or with our own addictions or confusions or delusions. But there is some really beautiful, fierce committed clarity to, we just know. And we forget, and we remember, and we help each other, but I think that's the beauty of these way-seeking mind talks. And that's how Laura began her book. Just like this, just like here. Oh, this is my heart. This is what it is to have a human life. You know what? A lot of it just hurts. And it's amazing. It's amazing. And I know Laura, but you don't. But you know Linda, and we know others in the room who are sharing their lives, and that's really, really important. We inspire each other with our bodhisattva practice and ways of just, yes, I will. Got 4 more people who are going to give talks next week. And each of you have given a talk in the past, or will give one in the future, but I hope we're each affirming our way-seeking mind. Suzuki Roshi said, it's wisdom seeking wisdom. You know, it's like that in us. We do it for ourselves and we do it for everybody. So maybe instead of chanting the traditional list that I have